Wins or losses, roster decisions, creating cultures. There are so many things that make a good coach, but why is there no good sports stat to quantify what exactly makes a good coach? Managing sports editor for The Post, Mark Hale, joined the studio, and he tried to do it. So let's get the results. My man, that's like, I don't know, that's like studying alien behavior right there.
This was an ambitious project, right? Yeah.
All right, so let's get into this thing, because why do you think it's so hard to actually measure the value of a coach with wins, losses, and stats, and even in today's analytics-heavy sports world?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the son of a football coach.
Yeah.
Isn't it, or shouldn't it just be your record is what your record is, and that should tell you how good a coach is?
Yeah, well, it's tricky, Brandon. So I talked to AJ Hinch, one of the people when I was doing my reporting, the excellent Tigers manager, and as he said, first of all, the game is about the players, and you know that as a former player yourself. And so what you have here is, look, these coaches and managers are overseeing teams with completely different talent levels. So what happens is it's easy to measure player versus player, but it's much harder to find a uniform way to measure coach versus coach when they're overseeing different roster talents. So, for example, if Georgia plays Yale in college football, Georgia is way more talented than Yale. And so if we're just going to simply say, well, this coach gets a win and this coach gets a loss, and that's how we're going to evaluate a coach based on wins and losses, that's kind of ridiculous, right, when it comes to the talent level that these two coaches have. And the other thing to think about it is there's this decision-making aspect of it when it comes to the players as well. Because, look, a basketball coach can design a perfect play that gets his best player a wide open jumper. The guy still has to make the shot. The manager can have a well thought out decision about, I'm going to bring in this reliever to face this batter. Makes sense. The guy's still got to get him out. And so ultimately, the players still have to do it. It makes it tough to evaluate these guys.
I tell people all the time, sports is chess with live players.
Yeah.
Like, you can move a pawn or a bishop all around, but once they get to that spot, that square, you have to catch that ball. You have to hit that jump shot. And when we talk about guys like Brian Daboll, Aaron Boone, Tom Thibodeau, they've all kind of been celebrated at one point, but then later they were doubted. So do you think that that's about their actual coaching ability, or it's just how, I guess, the narrative shift when wins and losses start to stack differently?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. The narrative aspect plays a huge role, and the three guys are completely different. With Boone, there's this annual consistency of they make the playoffs every year, but there's also this annual consistency of they fall short every year, and this annual consistency of it doesn't feel like the team is progressing, so that hurts him. With Daboll, it's almost the exact opposite. There was this initial high of he's surpassing expectations, and then the last 2 years, he's plummeted. So he doesn't have that track record. And with Tibbs, it's the exact opposite of that. He's got this track record. He's taken 3 different teams to the playoffs. He took the Knicks further than they had been in 25 years. Why did he get fired? Because ultimately the expectations went even higher, and he also had personality issues with the organization. It's 3 completely different guys and 3 completely different narratives.
Man, playing here in New York is one thing, but I can only imagine what it is coaching here. Like, it's not easy. It's not like coaching in Williamsburg, Virginia, or even Wichita, Kansas. It's always that "what have you done for me lately" type attitude or mentality. When you talk about Aaron Boone, that the Yankees are stable, but he hadn't won the chip. Brian Daboll, that's something different. Tom Thibodeau has did what no coach or anyone within that organization has done since my dad was a kid. You know what I mean? Not even like when we were kids, since my dad was a kid. So I ask the fan bases all the time, and I'll ask you, what makes a good coach here in New York?
New York, yeah. So
is there a stat for that?
It's a great question. So I do think it's a little different because the Yankees and Mets, what makes them different than the other teams is there's no salary cap. So those teams can spend and spend and spend, can always have elite talent. So as a result, those managers should win. There should be enough talent on that roster where those guys can win. Well, in the NBA and the NFL, it's not necessarily the same rules. These rosters don't have the same level of talent. So winning and losing still matters, and obviously for the Knicks and the Nets and the Giants and the Jets, but it's harder. I think identity when you're coaching matters. Does your team have an identity? I think an energy that they play with. Steve Kerr was talking about there's kind of like a spirit with a team that you know is well coached. I think he's spot on. Sometimes in New York, they say you need a bit of a grit grit and a toughness. I think that's true as well. And I think the other thing, Brendan, is there's got to be an accountability aspect. I think the fan base is eagle-eyed watching these teams. The media is a different level from other places. There's got to be an accountability and an ability of these managers to explain their vision and explain their decisions to the fan base.
So what would you call a better coach? And if we were to compare a coach, let's say there's a guy that comes in like a Joe Mazzulla of the Celtics. You come in, the roster's already stacked.
Yep.
You win a championship within his first year, 2 years.
Yep.
Or a guy that comes in, the team is absolutely horrible. Like a Brian Daboll comes in 2022 and takes that team to the playoffs. Who would you call the better coach or the most impressive coach?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, it's funny you mentioned Mazzulla and Brad Stevens, who as Joe Mazzulla's boss, had a line to me that not every team has the same ceiling. And so it's exactly to your point. It's very tricky to say which one is better and which one is worse because you're just, literally the Celtics are a championship roster, as you said, and the Giants at that point that Daboll was taking over were in a complete rebuild. So a lot of it is just like, do you feel like this team is maximizing its ability? And I would say, and certainly in the case of the Celtics, when Joe Mazzulla takes them to a championship, you're maximizing the ability. They went as high as they could go. Did Brian Daboll maximize the Giants? Probably in his first year. The last 2 years.
Second round of the playoffs.
100%. The last 2 years are probably more debatable.
Okay.
Yeah.
With all the research, all the conversations that you had, kind of like just final thought, what is there a sports stat that can quantify what makes a good coach?
And that's ultimately what I hope that maybe I would learn is, A, can we ever get there, and B, why is it so hard? And I think the answer is, and I talked to Billy King about this, who helps with coaching and executive placement in sports and other things. He does not think we'll ever get there, and I think he's right. I just think there's too much ambiguity. I think that there's too much subject to interpretation where we'll ever get a stat that's equivalent of like a WAR in baseball, where we say like that guy has a 7 fill in the blank name of the stat, and so thus we know he's good. I think a lot of this is just going to continue to be feel and opinion and judgment. And it's not a terrible thing. It just leads to a lot of dissension of like, I think this guy's good and I think this guy's bad. Whereas you would never say, I'm not sure if I think Aaron Judge is a good player. There's evidence to suggest that.
Well, definitely spark a conversation online and on social media. And I think, if we type in what will quantify a good coach, that even have Chat GPT scratching his head because there's just, like you said, there's just so much that factors into it.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, appreciate you coming in, man.
Brent, thanks,
Love the
man.
article.
You got it.